Welcome back to Digital Futures Education. So I've been thinking a lot about how schools teach technology skills. And there's definitely a disconnection between what is taught in schools and what is applicable in the field. And this isn't really a teaching problem per se, as much as it is a system problem. There are some major gaps in the way that we teach technology and teach technology skills, skill sets, content knowledge. And actually, I've lived it from both sides. I've done curriculum development for kindergarten, elementary, middle, high school, and college. And through all of those age levels, the goals are different. There's introductory elements to a concept in specific vocabulary. Then there's being able to apply what you're learning, at different levels, at different depths. And then there's the how am I going to use this skill in the real world? And honestly, in education, the teaching of the technology often become enveloped into curriculum in a way that becomes trapped a little bit by its own best interests. Maybe it's in an up and coming skill that people want to make sure is applied to a curriculum. It could be, we want to make sure students know how to do this one thing. But sometimes the question why is not always asked enough, or how something's specifically done in the classroom. It's more about a vision for creating educational opportunities for students that really can help support them in the real world, as opposed to just being a curriculum. And we hope that the curriculum's goal is that, but sometimes it gets a little lost. My first point is that sometimes there is a little bit more of an overemphasis on the content. A little bit more of an overemphasis on the content than the context. And the content comes in the form of activities, programming sequences, maybe specific vocabulary, and not enough time is able to be spent on the context of the learning of the technology skill. And often that's because we often get very consumed with understanding what the word means, or making sure a student knows what that word means, as opposed to having an opportunity to have the student demonstrate in an environment or in a place that demonstrates the knowledge of the skill. And this helps and hurts learners in that some students are necessarily more inclined to maybe regurgitate and answer back, but some students may particularly be hands-on learners and may actually apply themselves differently when a hands-on opportunity is available. And one of the downsides of this is that students can be encouraged to focus the terms on the vocabulary more than the actual meaning and application of these terms, which shifts the focus of the value. Is it a course where it's really all about scoring really well on a certain type of assessment, or is it knowing about the topic and how it may occur to them in the context of their real lives? So an example of this is the teaching of a skill like what to type in a program, or a specific command like you might see in a programming class. But you might not know when exactly to utilize that skill in the real world. Now, that issue happens all the way through education. And sometimes it isn't until a person is actually on the job that they then have to reach back towards the skills that they learned and think about how they're going to apply them. Another downside of not understanding the concepts in context is that you may learn how to memorize something or know what a term means, but you may not understand the system's thinking needed to best utilize this knowledge. And often that's another type of experience that's not necessarily available to a student until they're out of the classroom. And our system, requires, relies on educators. Educators are educators. there are limited opportunities sometimes to bring professionals into the classroom who can fully explain, because they're not educators, the value of the systems thinking, why to learn it, other than the evidence of their job and their position and how they do it. So we see here that there's a barrier, a breakdown in the way that we're teaching technology concepts without context. Now, I would say always encourage people that if they are teachers or educators or working with teaching technology, yes, you can work towards supporting students with context, real-world scenarios, projects that allow students to explore not only the concepts they're supposed to be learning, but how to do it in a specific context that does have connections to the real world, and that's great. But that does take an extra step. That is not necessarily where the focus is always applied. We know that. So just food for thought, how can we improve in that area? Some of the potential fixes could be to utilize simulations which match real world scenarios, more project-based projects that support a student, utilizing a skill for a real world outcome, and also maybe more context-based types of activities where the student has to specifically identify a context in which to utilize some of the knowledge that they have, just to make it more realistic for them. The next topic I want to talk about is career mapping into the curriculum. There's definitely a lack of mapping careers to technology curriculums across levels. I don't think it's until someone chooses a major in college that they really start to think about what do they want for a career outcome. What do they want this education that they're pursuing to mean? So I think it's okay to start students with thinking even earlier around why would you want to learn this information? Where is it applied? And what kind of jobs and career opportunities are going to come along with the knowledge you're going to gain. So as you leave high school, you have an idea of jobs and careers aligned with your skills. As you enter a collegiate or certification program, you have an idea of the skills that you're thinking about taking into a potential career, and you're aware of the jobs and careers. I think that's the challenge with not mapping curriculum back to jobs and careers. It's just a lack of student awareness around what types of jobs and careers are available with learning about a certain topic. And students are attracted to learning for different reasons. It might be a hands-on opportunity. It might be that they're just to working with numbers or computer hardware and familiarity with it. But at the end of the day, they need to know what types of opportunities are available to them and what types of decisions they're making with how they're applying their knowledge, both not only for their own personal motivation, but also for how they're going to navigate their career choices. Now, schools don't always have the introduction to this type of knowledge leads to this type of career introduction, whether it's a system administrator, technology support, a programmer, a DevOps position. Now, sometimes that is what a student needs to hear to begin to envision where all of this knowledge can eventually go. And it's important that schools begin to embrace that, understand these constantly changing and evolving positions. And with the staticness of technology curriculum and the changing job market, it's really essential to do this. Also, introduce students to job postings. Show them the types of jobs that are available. I try to do that in my own courses, is have them evaluate a job posting for the skills they have, the ones they need to maybe learn more about in order to progress in their career. But they need to think actively around, this is what a job search is looking for from a particular person that may be applying. This is what this posting is looking for. This is what this description is looking for. So it's really important to begin to show students these required skills, these things that why. They might not know exactly what they are at that point, but that's a teachable moment to then show them and talk to them around what is included in this posting and why. Ultimately, career exploration should be integrated into a technology education. A career exploration which allows students to understand their choices when they start to investigate careers around what types of skills may be needed, what type of opportunities exist, where that particular career may be going in terms of progressive technology. And it's important to have students embrace the change and understand that working in technology is exciting because it is consistently changing. Now, my fourth point is all about soft skills being ignored. Now, soft skills are definitely ignored until it's too late, right? It's important, and I do think there are educators out there in classrooms which totally support the integration of teamwork, collaboration, project work, gets students thinking about soft skills. Now, they're incredibly important. They're ignored until they're too late, often because there is an over-focus on the technical and trying to confirm that the student understands the material. And I think that's pretty good. You want to make sure students understand material. Now, it takes creativity and flexibility to bring into the classroom the necessary soft skills. And by saying soft skills until it's too late is that I think we have generations of people who've worked in technology who are great technologists, but their development of their soft skills, such as communication, collaboration, teamwork, didn't get as well developed. So how can we prevent that? What can we do? We need to embed these concepts more firmly into the skill sets. And the only way to do it is just to make sure people understand the value of the communication skills required with technology, the importance of problem solving and teamwork and collaboration with the use of technology. All of this is just really important to kind of embrace as much of as the technical skills. Also be sure that students are held accountable and graded and assessed on the use of their soft skills. It's something to help them understand the value. And be sure that students understand that these soft skills are often the reasons why people get promoted or held back from a promotion or released from their jobs, is the lack of the development of their soft skills as they're working in a tech position in tech. All of this is going to support providing students with feedback that's incredibly valuable to how they work, and to give them a broader picture of all of the areas they need to really be thinking about in terms of self-awareness and skill development as they prepare for careers in technology. This could be all the way through middle school and high school and into college. The recognition of these skills makes you better prepared. Make sure that soft skills are embedded into your teaching rubrics, how you assess, built into your teaching rubrics, built into how you assess student learning, and that you provide feedback for students in the area of soft skills. So my fourth and final reflection in this area is that technology is often taught like a static subject, and it's not. Technology is constantly changing, ever evolving animal. It requires learning about something that's going to change, but you take with it the knowledge that you gain into those changes. You're seldom are you completely learning something completely entirely new. You're always bringing your experience and your skill set and things that you've learned into new technology projects. Even as technologies change, they're built upon each other often. And the way we often teach technology is that we teach it sometimes, I won't say we always do this, is in this concept, maybe this technical skill. Now let's practice applying the technical skill, and when we're done applying the technical skills, how successful were you with your application? And pro, con, A, B, C, yes, no, good or bad. And that's great for reaffirming that knowledge. But we don't have a way of assessing preparation and resilience for when you're learning this information, taking it to the next level in terms of your knowledge, in terms of learning something new. How will you take the knowledge you learned in an entry-level IT course and transition it into a course on cybersecurity? You know, for example, if you do the CompTIA entry-level certification, are you prepared to then study for the Security Plus certification? Are you then prepared for a real-world problem or project in your entry-level IT position? Are you ready to apply for a cybersecurity job? The fear I think most people have comes from education not addressing this, because people know in the real world it's about adaptability of skills and the ability to take on projects and understand that you're not going to know it all, and there's going to be continual learning. And unfortunately in education, we don't usually teach that way. We don't usually teach in a way that asks students to know something, then plan on changing it. Ask students to firmly understand something, but what happens if this? Or firmly understand a concept and then have to understand a completely other concept, which may affect the first concept. And you see this with artificial intelligence now, in that there are groups of people developing knowledge in artificial intelligence because they had a base skill set or they applied themselves in a certain way and they're applying themselves to this knowledge. And then we have people who are neglecting to learn about artificial intelligence because they've learned about a certain amount of things. Maybe they're satisfied where they're at with their knowledge. They're just choosing not to take it on. And it's those choices, that the choosing not to take on another skill set, that comes out of fear. It's a learned behavior, definitely. And if we were to embrace it with education more about pushing students to be ready for change, I think we'd find and be ready also to assess them on that readiness for change. I think we would have learners who are much more prepared for what the real world is bringing to them. Also, with all of this change, it's also impossible right now to keep curriculum updated in the way that needs to be updated for students to learn the proper materials. And schools are struggling with this, but they're only measuring themselves against what they have as traditional measures. They're not necessarily measuring themselves against what the world is really bringing to the table in terms of the knowledge that students need. Sooner that you recognize students need this new type of learning, you need to find ways to help adapt and support them to learn. And not only does the curriculum not move enough, it also, those who are getting the opportunities are those who have the access, the materials, and understand the resilience that's needed. And those are all taught and learned behaviors. Those are all behaviors that can be taught, learned, and built into a student's skill set, especially when you start really young. So as a closing thought, we need students to be adaptable, understand systems thinking, be resilient, and really teaches them how to be strong communicators no matter what fields they're interested in going into in technology. But our systems are not adapting fast enough. They need to be adapting much more quickly to support these necessary changes. We need to think of new ways to update curriculum more quickly, bring new experiences to the classroom for students. And at the end of the day, we really need to focus on what does the world need from our students so that we can give it to them. And how are we going to best support students so that they can provide for themselves a life that they want? So if you're a teacher, what's one thing that you think that you would do to better help students in these areas? You can drop that in the comments if you like. And as a learner, how do you think you can best prepare yourself for the changes that inevitably come with technology each year? What are your strategies? How do you like to think about this? How do you adapt? How do you get to the next level? So thanks for joining me on Digital Futures Education. Please give a like and subscribe, and I hope you come back again soon. Thanks again.